DNA. DNA is important because it contains the genetic code that every single cell in your body needs to not only survive, but to fulfill its purpose in your body. This code is responsible for giving directions to each part of the cell. And where you'll find that code is in the nucleus. The nucleus, which is usually somewhere in the center of each cell in your entire body, is the heart and soul and brain of a cell all wrapped up into one. It's the most important part of the cell because inside it carries those blueprints, that genetic code in the form of chromosomes. And the reason why chromosomes are drawn to look like a little stringy mess is because all those strings are strings of DNA, which is where all that code, all those blueprints are. Now, the reason why I compare it to a blueprint is because DNA, again, it tells the cells what it needs to do and how it needs to do it. All the instructions for how a cell completes the function it was created for is contained in that DNA. But DNA, just like a blueprint, has to be able to be copied and be able to be passed on to others so that future cells can continue to follow the same instructions so that the same job can get done over and over again in the same way without fail. Now, when biologists talk about genetic code, they talk about two different ways that genetic code can express itself, two different ways that genetic code can show up or be observed. One way is genotype, and that is the genetic makeup of an organism. All these little colors and bumps and all these little pieces, that's the genotype. What order? Like in here, you'll see like green, orange, yellow, green. So those sequences, where you see the purples, where you don't, when they repeat each other, those exact sequences, that's the genotype. The phenotype is what we actually see in living organisms, the physical characteristics of an organism. So for example, this creature has a phenotype for long claws. It's possible that if this is the genes for those long claws, he has the long claws because of this specific sequence of colors. If these sequences of colors and pieces were messed up, he might no longer have claws. Changing the sequence could change his phenotype to be no claws, or soft claws, or short claws, or red claws instead of the light colored claws you see here. Phenotype is what you physically see and observe on the outside. Genotype is the actual sequence, the makeup of the organism at a microscopic genetic level. So when you hear the word genes, we're talking about regions, short pieces of DNA. And these genes tell the body how to build the specific proteins that carry out all the different processes and functions of your body. And those chromosomes that I mentioned earlier are units that are made up of genes. Chromosomes are the way that you not only carry the genes that you have, but also pass them on to your children. You got the genes you have came from chromosomes that were given to you by your parents when you were conceived. Now, a little bit more on genes that you'll want to take down for your notes, and that is genes store information that determines exactly what the genotype of the organism will be. And again, genotype is your genetic makeup, not what you physically see, like skin color, size, shape. No, that's not genotype. Genotype is the genetic makeup of the organism based on those rungs of the ladder of nucleotides and those strands of DNA. So with all this talk and time spent on the topic of DNA, it only makes sense that we talk a little bit about what happens when you need to make more DNA. Because again, all the cells in your body have DNA, but your body often needs to make new cells. But if those cells don't have their own DNA, they'll have no instructions, no blueprint for what their purpose in life should be. And the topic of this video is when a cell divides, how does it divide? And how does it divide in such a way that its genetic code gets properly copied into the new cell? How it does that is through DNA replication. Before a cell divides, it duplicates its DNA in a copying process called replication. This ensures that when a cell divides, like for example, when you get hurt and your body needs to heal that injury or that cut, and it does so by making a scab. Well, it does that by dividing cells to make new cells. But those cells need a complete set of DNA, and that's what replication tries to guarantee. And replication can begin at multiple places along the DNA molecule. There's many different places it can start. There's no like one for sure, always has to stop and start here, proceeding in both directions until each chromosome is completely copied. So up here you see a complete chromosome being unzipped and two new strands coming up to meet it to make two new sets of chromosomes, two new sets of genes. But to make sure those two sets make sense is the DNA polymerase. And the DNA polymerase goes along these separated strands and follows Chargaff's rule, Professor Chargaff. You know that G's and C's have to match up. Anytime you see a T, you got to add an A. Anytime you have an A, you got to add a T. G's and C's, A's and T's. The order doesn't matter. You just can't mix up A's and T's with G's and C's. And as it does that, it creates a new strand so that eventually you get two new sets of genetic code. So to summarize, you start with an old strand, it gets unzipped. Then the polymerase adds new bases, A's, T's, G's, and C's, along both sides of the original strands, and then new strands are attached to those bases until you get new genetic codes mixed with the old and the new, but two new individual genetic strings, chromosomes that do not need to be reattached. And that's all there is to know for the moment on replication. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.